Which of these creatures do you think would be the bravest when faced with a difficult task? A wolf, a bear, an owl, or a hummingbird? Hello everyone, I'm Kathleen Pelly. Welcome to Journey with Story. I wonder how many of you thought bear or wolf would be the bravest. Perhaps some of you thought it could be the owl or the hummingbird. Well, today in America, people celebrate Thanksgiving, where they remember how the first pioneers shared their harvest with the Native American people. And so to mark this feast day, our story this week is a Native American tale about a wolf, a bear, an owl, and a hummingbird. Let's see which one of them is the bravest. Before we begin, this is also a day where Americans take some time to reflect on all they have to be grateful for. So let me say a huge thanks to all of you all over the world who are our loyal listeners and support this podcast. We are so grateful and thankful for all of you, no matter where you live. Now, let's take a journey with The Legend of the Hummingbird. Long ago, before mankind walked the earth, the animals roamed freely across the land. They lacked for nothing and enjoyed living their lives with few concerns. Food was bountiful and none went hungry. However, something changed over time. The animals became greedy and selfish. From the great grizzly bear to the smallest squirrel, the animals began hoarding resources. Bickering and fighting often broke out. While there had been harmony before, discord reigned supreme. The Great Spirit looked down upon the animals' selfishness and was displeased. As punishment for their deeds, the Great Spirit cast a shroud of darkness over the land. The animals became fearful. They had never known such darkness before. Out of fear, they sought out the greatest among them, the grizzly bear. "What is this darkness?" Wolf asked Bear. Being the wisest, Bear answered, "The Great Spirit has placed a shroud over the land. We must try to remove it. Who among you is willing to undertake this task?" Wolf spoke first. "I will reach up and bring the shroud down." Wolf then went to the tallest mountain. He found that he could not reach the shroud, so he stood on his hind legs. No matter how far he stretched, he could not reach the shroud. Defeated, and with his tail between his legs, he returned to Bear. "I could not reach the shroud." Bear thought quietly for a moment before he spoke. "Wolf could not reach the shroud. I shall go myself to remove it." And Bear started off for the highest mountain. When he reached the peak, he reached for the shroud, but could not touch it. He stood on his hind legs, yet it remained out of reach. Seeing a nearby tree, Bear climbed to the top. Reaching, he still could not grab the shroud. Bear returned to the animals. "I could not reach the shroud, even at the top of a tree on the highest mountain." The animals wailed in fear. Owl, whose wisdom was second only to Bear's, caught everyone's attention. "I have an idea." Bear quieted the upset animals. "Silence, let Owl speak. Let us all go to the mountain top and stand on each other's shoulders. With his strength, Bear will be on the bottom and I will be on the top. From there, I will fly up and remove the shroud." The animals agreed that it was a good plan and made their way to the top of the mountain. Once there, Bear steadied himself. The animals began climbing on the backs of each other. Slowly, they began rising, higher and higher. They went above the clouds and closer to the darkness. From the top, Owl launched into flight. Owl soared as high as he could. With a talon, he reached for the shroud. But it was still too far away. Exhausted, owl fell to the tower of animals. He struck them and knocked the entire tower down. Injured and defeated, the animals despaired. As Bear tried to think of a way to remove the shroud, a small hummingbird approached him. "I can do it," Hummingbird said. Bear laughed. "You, of all the greatest animals in the forest, couldn't bring the shroud down." "I can do it," repeated Hummingbird. Bear snorted. "Go ahead, but if the best of us can't do it, you surely can't." Hummingbird nodded, then took to the sky. His wings were a blur as he furiously climbed. He passed the clouds and the highest point that Owl had reached. Flying higher than he had ever flown, Hummingbird used all his speed. His strength started giving out and his speed slowed, yet still he kept flying. Pushing himself further than he ever had before, Hummingbird's tiny beak penetrated the shroud. With no energy left, Hummingbird fell to the earth. Once on the ground, he rested. The animals gathered around Hummingbird in silent shock. Bear only pointed to the shroud. Hummingbird looked to the sky. Amid the permeating darkness, a single dot of light shone brightly, where his beak had broken through the shroud. Still breathing heavily, Hummingbird got to his tiny feet. The other animals watched as he took flight and shot once again towards the shroud. Again, Hummingbird flew as fast and as high as he could. He was able to stick his beak through once more before falling back to the earth. After a moment's rest, he got up and flew again. Hummingbird repeated his incredible flight over and over again, each time piercing the shroud so that a pinpoint of light could shine through. He continued flying despite the immense strain put on his tiny body. Hummingbird was starting to weaken. The resting period between flights became longer. His breathing started to become uneven and laboured. Yet he persisted and flew to the shroud so many times that the other animals lost count. After one of his longer rests, Hummingbird brushed himself off and flew. He flew the fastest he had ever flown in his life. He shot up to the perforated shroud at an incredible pace. Hummingbird felt his energy leaving, yet he continued. He flew ever higher until his entire head went through the shroud. Having spent the last of his energy, he fell to the earth and drew his final breath. The Great Spirit was moved by the bravery and resolve of the hummingbird. His voice rang out for all to hear.
"Hear me. I placed the shroud as punishment for your selfish ways, but the actions of the brave hummingbird have softened my heart. Therefore, I will lessen the punishment. But the shroud will remain to remind you what the hummingbird did here today."
And so it was done. Half of the time the shroud was lifted, bringing the light back to the earth. The other half was marked by the return of the darkness. Only now there were countless pinpoints of light from where Hummingbird had poked his beak through. And looming in the night sky, a large, bright disk shone where the hummingbird's head went through the shroud. And that is how night and day came into being. Oh, wasn't that a lovely story about a brave little creature who gave up his very life to help his fellow creatures? Let's all be thankful this Thanksgiving for our friends and our family who make all kinds of brave sacrifices for us to make our lives a little easier and better. Happy Thanksgiving. Cheerio then. Join me next time for Journey with Story. Music and post-production was by Colette Jonas.